Okay, so here we go, Dennis Edwards. We're
Hi,
starting
David.
our interview. Thank you. Thanks for your time. I just want to say you and Mark are institutions in our community, not just now, but for decades. And a lot of it is because you've always been there. You've always been passionate, authentic, hardworking, always to be counted on. So thank you and Mark for everything you've done. And one of the reasons we want to hear your perspective is because you have been consistently there for decades. So I thought you'd start with us and just kind of tell us how you first got to the LGBTQ community, when you came out, when you started getting involved.
Okay. Well, I went to college in Michigan. I went to Michigan State University and came out during my sophomore year. And I was lucky enough that then going into my junior year, I shared a house with three other gay people, two other gay men and a lesbian. And one of the men who organized the house was the representative. He was the chair of the Gay Student Council for all of Michigan State. And at Michigan State, what they did, the student council at large allowed all of the minority councils to elect one representative among themselves to represent all the minorities to the student council. And so there was the African American, it was probably the Black council and the Latin council and the et cetera, et cetera. Women, there was a women's council and there was the gay council. And my roommate was the head of the gay council. And he was elected by that group to represent all of the minorities to the student council at large at Michigan State. So by virtue of living in that house, he was also a weed dealer. So everybody came to our house. I was exposed for the first time to the gay community. I was also, I was 19, so I was just exploring not only my sexuality, but who I was. Just my mind was really expanding at that time. And I remember getting together at the student union to make posters for the march and being a part. We had a speakers group that would go out to the dormitories as invited speakers and speak in the lounges on issues, on gay issues. And I was never a speaker at that time, but I would go to those meetings and listen to the speakers. And this was the early 80s. I'm talking about 81, 82. So, I mean, it was the dark ages in terms of our audiences really did not have any knowledge. Being gay was still really a foreign concept. So the questions, now we would look at those questions and laugh because we've had now 40 more years have passed. But it taught me a lot about how to handle an audience, how to handle people who might be hostile, people who might be afraid by being a part of those meetings. But so fast forward a little bit, I graduated and moved to Miami. When I was a sophomore at Michigan State, I had met a graduate student and we became a couple. He got a job teaching at the University of Miami and moved down here, and we had 2 years apart. But my goal was always to meet him in Miami. And the first time I ever set foot in Miami, I knew that this was going to be my home. I had never seen a palm tree. I'd never eaten fresh fish. The rhythm of the city, the music, everything about it was so foreign to Flint, Michigan. Not that, there's anything wrong with Flint, but this was a very exotic location to me. So I spent 2 years planning to move here. And to be with him, when I got here, it only lasted about 2 weeks. But I knew that I was, that being in Miami was the right place for me. So I wanted to, you want to make friends when you get, so, back then, if those of you that are my age, I'm 58. So if it's 1984 in Miami and you want to meet people, there was the bars, the beaches, and the baths, the 3 Bs. And I would hang out on 21st Street Beach. I met a lot of people there. That was a real social place to gather. And someone that I met there on the beach said, you should join the Sunshine Athletic Association. I don't know if you remember that, Damien, but it was the SAA. They played volleyball and softball on Sunday afternoons, and there was a bowling league on Monday nights. So I joined the bowling league. And not long after so this is in 1984, probably around October. There was a man who got up during announcement time at the bowling league and said, Health Crisis Network, which is our local AIDS organization, is having a volunteer drive for people who want to get involved and help with the AIDS crisis. So at that time, Health Crisis Network was 7 people working out of a trunk of a car, the 7 founders of that organization. One of them was the one who came to speak at the bowling place. And he said, we're having a training this Saturday at the Switchboard of Miami, please come. So I went that Saturday, and I was one of only 2 people who showed up for the entire training. And they said, if you want to help someone with AIDS, go talk to this person, who I believe was Sally Dodds. And if you want to help in the office and answer phones and do that kind of stuff, go to this office. And that's how I met Russell Corbett, who is still my, I know for certain he's my longest standing friend here in Miami. We've been friends since that day. And so that began just a really powerful, horrible, terrible, wonderful 15 years of doing AIDS work in Miami.
Dennis, can you describe a little bit what it was like that time period, just in general, just like the public, the community, what was going on, what things felt like emotionally?
Well, if you have to remember, in 1984, they hadn't even identified the virus yet. So, it feels a lot like what we're going through right now, or what we have been going through with COVID, in that, how do you get it? Can you get it this way? Can you not get it that way? What is it, what exactly is causing this? And so there was a lot of unknown, a lot of fear, and people were getting sick really fast. And describing what it was like, it just snowballed. I said that in November, there were 2 of us showed up at the volunteer drive. By that spring, by February or March, we had a volunteer outreach, and there were nearly 200 people at the St. John's Lutheran Church. I mean, it kind of just went boom. It all of a sudden became, like, everybody wanted involved. And that meeting at the church was the one where I was introduced to Mark, my husband. He came in, and like a lot of people in those days, volunteering for the AIDS cause was, give me someone with AIDS to take care of. I'll come clean their house. I'll bring them groceries. I'll take them to doctor's appointments, that sort of thing. So, and Mark had that point of view like everybody else did when he was talking to Sally Dodds. For those of you who don't know who she is, you should know who she is. She's one of the founders of Health Crisis Network and became its first executive director. But she said to him, to Mark, Mark said, I want to get involved, whatever. And she said, well, you're a businessman, you're an attorney, you should, where we really need your help is on the business side. And you should meet this kid who is our treasurer. I became a volunteer in November. I joined the board in December and became the treasurer and chair of the finance committee. We had a budget of $6,000. So we had weekly board meetings. We decided everything. I mean, we had a board vote on whether to buy office supplies. That was the kind of, really, really grassy grassroots. And for people who know who Frank Wager is or don't know who Frank Wager is, he was the person who started the White Party, which was a fundraiser for Health Crisis Network. Frank and I joined the board of HCN in December of '84 on the same night. And then the first White Party at Vizcaya was 1 year later. anyway, just some more, just some trivia, some gay history trivia for Miami. So yeah, and as I say, things got bad so quickly, so the organization grew really quickly as well.
Yeah, and Frank is no longer with us.
Right.
So among the many, I mean, I look at pictures back then and half the people are gone. So
Yes.
it was pretty devastating. And from there, how did you start changing as a volunteer and growing?
Well, you know, everything about the 80s, you know, it was, that terrible time was so compressed. I mean, I remember that even to decide as an organization, are we going to recommend that people be tested or not? That was a big deal. We started the first AIDS walk, and then there started to be other organizations like Body Positive, which sort of had the affiliation with ACT UP, and other organizations that came up that then resented us for our success, because we were raising a lot of money. And I'm trying to think of the order now of how things progressed. So at the same time that this was all going on, I had a full-time job in the insurance industry. Mark was running his company, his family business, which was an industrial laundry and linen supply. And Mark joined the steering committee of a new idea that had come to town called Miami City Ballet. And so that was happening at the same time as well. And Mark became the president of Miami City Ballet. I ended up going to work there as the first marketing manager. And so during this time of both of us then ultimately being on the board of Health Crisis Network, we were both deeply involved in Miami City Ballet as well. And I worked there for a couple of years and then left that job to become development director at Health Crisis Network.
And Dennis, this was also the period right after Anita Bryant into the 80s. How would you describe it from living in Miami after Anita Bryant?
Well, yeah, that's such a great question, because you can't talk about Anita Bryant without talking about Ruth Shack, who is one of my all-time heroes. And I actually, when I had first come to Miami to visit my boyfriend on spring break, the TV was on and there was an ad running of this woman hanging out of a helicopter saying, Miami is a big, beautiful city and we ought to run it like one. And I thought, who is this woman? She is awesome. And so I first met Ruth Shack through TV and I didn't know about Anita Bryant and all of that as well, but I just thought she's awesome. She was running for mayor and that's why she was in the helicopter. So after moving to Miami and getting together with Mark, you know, which has now been over 35 years from that time in 1985, he was a part of Anita Bryant. He knew Ruth Shack. And I also remember it was then the Day Community Foundation gave Health Crisis Network one of its first grants, if not its first grant, one of its first grants. And I remember us having a board meeting in that upstairs at that little church, and she walked in and I was like, it's the woman from the helicopter. And so, I mean, one of the greatest joys of my life of being gay in Miami is, you know, I've become friends with my hero. And, you know, I'm sorry to kind of diverge, but,
Oh, please.
You know, Ruth introduced us she was able to open doors for us at Health Crisis Network that no one else could. I remember she took Sally and I to lunch at the City Club, or one of those bankers clubs, you know, membership only on the top floor of some building. And Representative 𝗳𝗓𝗓𝗓 came by the table to say, first of all, everybody would come by the table to say hello to Ruth Shack. And so he came over and she introduced us. Sally did the elevator speech about Health Crisis Network and what was going on with AIDS and how we needed the support and everything. So when he got ready to go, I asked him if he had a card. And Ruth leaned over to me and she said, "Dear, his number's in the front of your phone book."
That's amazing.
I was pretty green, but so then of course, you very quickly, if you live in Miami for very long, you get caught up on that history of what exactly happened with the Human Rights Ordinance in 1977 and Anita Bryant and that battle. And I'm trying to think of how that affected us. I think that the whole HIV and AIDS battle then brought us back into the arena. We had lost, and it was a horrible, I wasn't here, like I said, at that time, but Mark tells me about that, the utter, to be told by your community, to be told that, no, you are less than, you should be fired from your job. You should not be a teacher in Miami-Dade County if you're gay. The community was devastated by that. But then with HIV and AIDS, I think we rediscovered our power. At that time, we were still very heavily, community for me, and I'm talking about for my group, community was still heavily centered in the bar culture. You went to this bar on Sunday afternoons, and you went to that one on Thursday night for members night, and you went to that one, and that's how your circle of friends moved in and around. And I don't remember, when I first got here, outside of the HIV community, there wasn't much political action going on that I'm aware of. It was pretty much, it was all focused and centered on HIV and AIDS. And even like the groups that supported us, a lot of us were we weren't in the closet, but it was kind of a semi don't ask, don't tell. Like Mark and I didn't go together and sit at the gala table at Miami City Ballet as a couple in 1986 and 1987. That's something that came over time. And
you didn't hold hands.
No.
None of that.
No, and I remember too, doing the fundraising and stuff for Health Crisis Network. Even the groups that were the most supportive, like Network, which was kind of the gay chamber of commerce back in the day, they were, they didn't want their names on anything. They might write you $1,000 check. And that was, $1,000 was $1,000. And in the 80s, they might write you that check, but they didn't want their name on a thing. If you mailed them anything, they didn't want the identification on it was very closeted. It was like, now when I look back at it, I think how strange and fearful it all was, but it's just the way it was. No one questioned that's the way it was. It was also, this group was primarily, well, it was all men. I think there was one woman in Network that I remember in those days. So it was all men, and of course we were all white. But this was the group that gave us the financial wherewithal. If you remember Dick Pollock, who started the Friends of HCN, he told all of his friends in Network, you all have to give $1,000 and that'll make you a friend of HCN. And, it was, that was the ways that we've raised funds. It was between the bars. You know how many nights I sat at the door at a bar collecting $1 at a time, or, the bars and Network,
Yeah, I remember that you couldn't even use the word gay in the newsletter for Network. Like, it was not allowed. So, and I also remember that we had no political at all understanding of anything. I think HIV/AIDS is what brought us into the world of needing to
I think so too.
The political process.
Yeah, I think so too. One thing that I do want to mention is because parallel to the gay community advancing our rights, our school board was very forward thinking. Before before our human rights ordinance, or between Anita Bryant and SAVE, there were other things happening among our allies. And a lot of people don't know that Betsy Kaplan, who was a school board member, she was on a statewide Florida Ethics Commission for Education. And she convinced them that the statewide organization, that gay students and faculty ought to be protected from discrimination and harassment. And they would not protect the staff, but the state ethics commission said, you know what, the students should be protected from discrimination and harassment. So she did that at the state, and then she came down here and got together with Janet McAlealy and told our school board, look, the state's telling us we have to protect our kids in harassment. So it's kind of is a very clever little trick that she did there. And so then, if you remember, Robert Lupo was the head of this South Florida educators group. See, no, the word gay wasn't in it, but it was a group of gay teachers. And they got Tom Amiano from the San Francisco School Board to come and speak, and invited our school board to listen. The only two who showed up were Betsy and Janet. And he said, this is how we did it in San Francisco, and it's really important that you get the staff protected as well. And they did. Within 6 months, they had gotten quietly, the Miami-Dade County public school system had endorsed had made a policy of, sorry about that, I thought I turned it off.
No worries.
And made a policy of non-discrimination and non-harassment for both students and faculty. And that was in 1992. So, and then immediately training started, they started, enacting that policy. So very forward for the state of Florida and for the entire Southeast. We weren't first like Ruth Shack was with her human rights ordinance in '77, but very much, so I just wanted to let people know that story that might not know.
Yeah, that's great.
Betsy and Janet in the early '90s were doing that work in our schools, kind of under the radar and behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So by the mid '90s, I was doing volunteering at Health Crisis Network. I no longer was the development director there. I was volunteering as in the education department. And we were going out, we were doing those AIDS 104 trainings that were mandated by the state. Anybody who got a state licensure, if you were a massage therapist, cosmetologist, of course, all the nurses and all of that had to go through 4 hours of AIDS training. And I used to go out and do those trainings. And I used to go do them in senior centers and in schools and I was just doing a lot of both training and sharing my knowledge and my personal story as well. I think most people know, but this might be a coming out of sorts for me, that I tested positive for HIV in 1989. So that's 31 years ago. It'll be 31 years ago next month. No, wait a minute. It's already 31 years. Anyway, time is fluid. So my work in those next few years was going out. First of all, I didn't think, this was before protease inhibitors. I didn't expect that I would be alive.
Wow, Dennis, wait a minute. I want you to explain, because what you just said is a time period that is really dramatic. I mean, getting that kind of a result when it was still a very deadly, if not lethal virus. How did you react? How did you deal with all of that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to put into words, Damien. I mean, we just kept working. We just kept dancing as fast as we could. We were, when I got that diagnosis, and this was 1989. So everybody who got it, you figured within 5 years, I won't be here. And I had started a business that was not doing well, that it ended up failing. And this was a couple years later, but anyway, when it was like, what am I going to do next? And Mark said to me, what do you want? If you could do anything in the world, what would you want to do? And I said, you know, what I was thinking was, I don't have much time left. So I said, I just want to be a full-time volunteer. And that's when I started doing I was doing the hotline with every Friday morning with Robert Longstreth and Trudy Finkelman. We answered that AIDS hotline. I mean, these were still the days where people would call us and say, oh my gosh, I got drunk last night and I went home with this girl and I think I could have been, you know, wanting to share what happened to them and could I have gotten AIDS from this? It was people were very low information and needed, and then there were the people who knew they had it who needed resources. And so we would direct them to get food, shelter, counseling, and medical help. And then I was also going out and, like I say, going to the schools and doing a lot of teaching and education and outreach in that and teaching. So this was, when I say before protease inhibitors, the first class of drugs that were available were not, I think they did keep some of us alive a little bit, perhaps a little bit longer, but they weren't the power punch that the cocktails and the
protease.
The protease and then the cocktails. I'm sorry, the phone rang and it distracted me again. Is there any way we can put a pin in this and come back for a second? Because the guy that's painting is trying to get my attention.
Yes, we can. We're back.
Okay. So I was just sharing about the difference in treatments, how they so dramatically changed. I remember in 91 that I would have to set my alarm at 2 o'clock in the morning to take, I was taking probably 15 pills a day, multiple times, some with food, some without food. They all had a side effect. There was there was a headache or an upset stomach or a this or a that. It was not, it's not the way that it is today. And I remember also, I remember when I was at HCN's offices and someone said, there's a thing it was at one of the hotels in Miami Beach, someone was coming to speak and they were going to talk about that they think that they had found the answer, this protease, and they called it protease inhibitor. It was the first time I'd heard of it. And I was so tired and I had been so looking forward to going home. And they said, well, you can just go home. We'll tell you what they said. And I'm like, no, I'm not missing this. I want to be in this room where that happens. When they tell us, basically when they tell me I'm not going to die, you know, it was amazing. And of course, they have continued to make strides in that arena. Or, you know, the medications now are even so far above what they were then. But, you know, again, it changed the trajectory of my life. I stopped my career, and I was lucky to be able to do that because my husband had enough money to support us both. You know, so I was in a very unique, you know, a lot of people were cashing in their life insurance, you know, and living on that during those times, because we didn't think that we were going to survive it. We had seen so much death.
And at the same time, Dennis, as you were living through this and working on AIDS, comes our ability to organize politically for our rights.
Absolutely.
Data Action Pack, all of this is happening at the same time. So I thought you could talk a little bit about that. Okay,
so I remember working with you on the Data Action Pack fundraisers for the New Year's Eve party, and I remember, it's funny because I know that you've already interviewed Joan Schaefer for this series, and I specifically remember sitting in the committee room, and as was often the case, Joan was the only woman there, and we were talking about what to charge, and we'll charge this for men, and the women were always saying our events were too expensive, so we suggested, well, maybe we should have this other price for women, and Joan went through the roof. She says, I am offended that you want a separate price for women. Like, okay, we'll charge everybody the same price. So, but seeing your interview with Joan reminded me of the three of us in the room having that conversation more than 20 years ago. Goodness. Yeah.
I think it was $25.
Yeah. So during that time, I was still doing a lot of education and outreach, that sort of thing for Health Crisis Network. And by that time, I mean, Mark and I were both on numerous arts boards. I do remember I was trying to think of the sequence of events of the birth of SAVE. I know that we were there at the beginning, and I remember, this is the way I remember it, but you might be able to correct some of the timeline or the facts. But I remember that we were wanting to fight this Amendment 2, the state's amendment that was going to not allow municipalities to pass protections for gays, and that there was a winter party on the beach to raise money for that. And then when the courts said that amendment could not go on the ballot, the language was not constitutional, that we couldn't put that on the ballot, there was a discussion of what do we do now? And that's where my mind, that's the birth of SAVE is somehow wrapped up in all that. And I remember, this is a little bit funny, I remember a meeting here at our house and I was talking to Mark about this in preparing for this interview. He said, do you remember that meeting where we were trying to decide what to do with the money and how to organize and what to do? And he said, yeah, kind of. And I said, do you remember what happened? And he's like, not exactly. And I said, well, you know what? I don't know what happened, but whatever happened, it happened in my house. I don't know, but where it happened was here. Don't know what happened, but I'm sure that you could fill in those details. But I think what was important. I think what was important about that is that we had been faced with this challenge where we would have to raise a ton of money, like in the millions, to defend this statewide effort, and the best we would get out of it is nothing. Right.
So what we decided was we built an infrastructure, we built this momentum. Now let's take this and make it pass our own protections. Let's do something positive, and instead of having to defend against an attack. So we took a different direction, which is good.
And I remember, and this I think was all part of that. What's swimming around in my head is that Bruce Kaplan from the County Commission kind of surprised us by introducing a new human rights ordinance without really getting all of that organized with the gay community in advance. And it kind of surprised everyone. But we were like, well, we have to jump on that bandwagon as well. I mean, we have to support that effort. And people like you, I mean, there were so many who then did that groundwork with the commissioners to make that happen. And I have to say that at that time, I know that we gave a lot of money. I remember George Rsuli once saying, if it weren't for your donations, we wouldn't have been able to last as long as we did. But we gave a lot of money, but I wasn't involved in the meeting with commissioners or pulling any power strings or with that. We were primarily donors at that point. But before that, I remember you and I having lunch one day, and you asking me if I would be interested in becoming the first director at SAVE. And you had these ideas for the bus campaign and the billboard campaign. And you were like, we're doing all of these exciting things. It's just about to get rolling. This is a great ground floor opportunity if you want to get back in, if you want to work. And I didn't do it. And it's good because, I mean, George Rsuli eventually did, and look what happened. So, I guess it's like the actor who wins the Oscar, and then another actor says, I turned down that role.
That's great. That's funny.
Turned down that part.
That's great, but you were just as instrumental. I mean, always.
Just in a different way. So, I mean, it's really wonderful. I mean, the powerful friendships and bonds that we made during those horrible years at the height of the epidemic are that's one piece of the time capsule. And then there was a new battle to fight and a new front. The AIDS and HIV work continued. It continued. It morphed into something different. Those early days were, as I say, grassroots and volunteers, and there was this passion that was born out of the tragedy. That and when it became more of medical management, and less reliant on volunteers and all the work being done by professionals, Health Crisis Network merged and is now Care Resource, which is, a regional medical powerhouse. It's fantastic. I think Russell Corbett, one of the founders, is still on the board of that organization, and they're fantastic. But I hate to put it this way, but they didn't need us anymore. They didn't, they didn't need us to run the AIDS walk. They didn't need us to answer hotline phones. They didn't need us to pick up and deliver people to medical appointments. The community aspect of AIDS and HIV disappeared for us, for those of us that were there at the beginning. And so here was the whole SAVE and then the Decline to Sign campaign was there to fill that that gap for those of us that were still committed to community service.
And what about today, Dennis? Do you think that for the newer activists, I mean, are those things elements that we should think about? Are they still here in different form, or what are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. I think, you'd have to ask somebody younger. I know that I have younger friends. One woman that comes to my mind in particular, who says she's planning next year to move to St. Pete because the gay community is stronger there. And to me, our gay community is pretty strong. There are multiple worthwhile organizations that whatever cause you are passionate about, whatever specificity of the cause that you want to get involved in, it's there. If you want to get involved in the trans activism, that's there. If you want to continue to do work in schools and education for young people, that's there. There's still the political work, between Equality Florida and SAVE. There's that kind of work that you can engage in here locally. So I'm not quite, but see, when someone 30 years younger than me tells me that she doesn't feel community, then there is something. There's something that needs to be done to convey it, and to foster that. You hate to lose our young generation that want to live in St. Pete because they feel like that has more of a gay community. It's kind of hard to put your finger on, I think.
Well, especially when we didn't have any community. I mean, in our years when we were that age, there wasn't really a community or any sense of it.
Well, I think though that yes and no. I mean, 21st Street Beach was a community. Uncle Charlie's on Thursday nights was a community. I mean, I'm not it. And then the family that we built at Health Crisis Network and the family we built at SAVE. I mean, we had community. I guess, in some ways you have to go out and find your own or help build your own. I think a lot right now, especially in this past year, the past couple of years, because there always seems to be this conflict between the pragmatists and the activists, who gets to define us as a community and who's acting right in representing us. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, the issue that, the Human Rights Campaign was if we can get job discrimination for gays and lesbians, we'll take it because that's a step. And then there are people who say, but you've left our trans brothers and sisters behind, or non-gender. There's so much that I've learned, like I say, just in the past couple of years about inclusivity that just would not have even occurred to us, or it would not have occurred to me. I mean, I never met someone who was trans until the late 90s. The first organization that introduced that into our realm for me locally was Project Yes Institute. They started doing the gender trainings, and they would welcome trans speakers. And I'd been active in the gay community in the political and AIDS arenas for 15 years and never met someone who was trans until then. And it took until really the past couple of years to really wake up some of us old timers about being more inclusive in our thinking and in our language and all of that. And sometimes I look back and to complete that thought, a lot of the reading and a lot of the information that I've paid more attention to just since George Floyd has really opened my eye. I look back sometimes and I think, wow, we could have done better. But then I also have to say that we did what we really did do our best with the tools that we had. People don't remember that when we started Health Crisis Network, they hadn't even invented fax machines, let alone cell phones. We didn't have the access to universal 24-hour news and social media and everything. We would not have been aware. And I'm sure that there was police brutality in the 80s. I'm absolutely certain of it, but it was never, as one of the complaints, it was never reported. We didn't know. Now, that's not an excuse. I'm just saying we didn't have the information that we have now. Now that we have the information, we have no excuse. We have to be a part of, a strong part, I think, of the new diversity, equity, and inclusion movement, and build those bridges. And I've always been more on the pragmatist side. I remember even back in the days of HCN, we were the ones that would go to the commission meeting to sign up, to speak, to work within the system, to be, to change hearts and minds. And then there was the other group that wanted to throw a bomb in the room. And we needed both of those. I've always been on the more pragmatist side, but I, as a pragmatist, I see how that we could have done better. And I think we can do better in the future of being more inclusive to the T in our LGBT for sure. And also the movement for Black Lives. It's really been an eye-opening couple of years for me. If I just would share one more thing, and it's just, this is my little word of advice, and people may agree with it or not agree with it, but I think that in order for us to be more welcoming, we have to make more room at the table, but not just at the table, at the head of the table. And I think that the next time, I'm just saying to people who, I am a white gay male, and I'm very proud of the contributions that white gay men have made to the movement. We couldn't have gotten through AIDS without us. We couldn't have got any of these things passed without us. We've been great, but the next time I'm asked to be on a board or accept an award, I'm going to say no. Have you thought about a person of color? Have you thought about a trans person instead? Would be better at this stage, and younger. The kids have new ideas. They have new ways of looking at things. And we've got to put their voices up front, center, and in leadership. Young people, people of color, and trans, I think is the next stage for our community's development. Because if we want everyone at the table, then we gotta make room. And that means some of us have to step away from the table. I'm ready to go back to the children's table.
So Dennis, what advice would you give these people as they come into leadership?
Well, if they're, coming into leadership, is different than just getting involved at all. Let me start by saying to tell people to jump in and get involved. When you get to be my age and you're looking back, you'll be really happy that you did. We weren't perfect. There were people who did more than we did. There are people who did a lot less, or people who did nothing. But Mark and I can look back, and we just say, we were present for all of the major and the minor ups and downs of life and community, and we were present for every challenge. We never set one out. We were there in some way, and that's good. When you get to be our age, to be able to look back and say, you know what, we were there, and I take a lot of pride in that. In terms of leadership, the only thing I can say is to stay focused on what your goal is and not personalities and politics. That's, it's hard to say in a political organization, by its nature, you're going to pay attention to politics, but by that, I mean, not power struggles and ego battles and dismissing the ideas of others, or even, if you want to be a leader for the future, don't start by criticizing the past. There's a lot of people who look at us, people like me, and we're just not woke enough, and we're not keeping up fast enough with the pace of things, and how dare we log on to the Zoom and not put our gender pronouns after, oh my gosh, I forgot this time. You might be more woke than we are, but we were the alarm clock. So just calm down, be a little gentle with some of us because we are trying. We want to keep up and we want to be respectful. But I kind of had took a little digression there, but it's sometimes hard not to get sucked in to the drama. And so I would just say as you come into leadership positions, is to stay focused on the goal and welcome all ideas and perspectives, but stay strong and don't get all sidetracked with the drama, because the drama will come. There'll be someone who doesn't like your approach, or if you stay focused on your mission, then you'll be all right.
Dennis, I think that's great advice, especially the part about being gentle, because I think being gentle and kind is always a good way to bring people together. I want to take a moment and just thank you, not just for the interview, but for everything you have done. Not one day, not a week, not a year, but decades of work. And like you said, you and Mark have shown up at every single thing, and you have volunteered at every single thing, whether it was, checking petitions or any kind of work, there's no real way to thank you. So I'm going to do it anyway.
Thank you. Thanks, Damian. I mean, coming from you, that's really powerful, because when I say there are people who did more than we did, you're one of those people. Our respect for you and the debt that this whole community owes you is you couldn't put it into words. So I'm proud that we've been friends all these years, 30 years, too. And that we have been in this together. And I love the video series that you're doing. I'm learning a lot from it, and fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. A big hug and a very, very big kiss. And I have enjoyed every minute.
Thanks, Damian.
Bye-bye.